I'm Adam from Blue Line Flies. This is, we're going to tie for you today a fly that I designed a couple years back called the Conjurer. And it's got a great big head on it to really help push water, but also a tail that really swims. It's got two hooks, a rear hook for those bass that are pretty sneaky. A lot of times they might just grab the very back of your fly. So I really like to have that rear hook on there, and a really stout front hook to be able to grab trout, bass, whatever. One of my favorite trout flies, one of my favorite bass flies, and we put it through the ringer. Hopefully it works for you. So I am going to start out with a 15 millimeter shank. I like to use a small shank for the rear. So this is actually going to hold our tail. And by putting our tail on a shank, it's going to give us a lot more movement than just off the back of a hook. I'm tying this fly in white, so generally I just like to use the same color thread for the fly that I'm tying. So I've got a white thread that we're going to lay down on a 15 millimeter shank. First material we need is craft fur. Any sort of craft fur will be just fine for you. So we're going to go ahead and prep some out. And then one of these under fur combs works great to kind of pull out those loose ends at the rear. So the very first one I lay down is a tail. I like to use my vise to kind of measure distances. If you always use the same vise for that, it kind of helps you be able to replicate different lengths of materials. So I don't use a lot of hair for that very first tie-in. We're actually going to come in and make it a lot bigger. So I like to put that first one in. That gives just a little extra bulk below the brush that we're about to make to put on top of it. So I like to do that out the rear, and then I'll make a brush. The brush will really help the fibers sit a little higher, and by doing that, you'll get a little bit better profile. So next step is we're going to make a dubbing brush or a dubbing loop, and we're just going to create it out of craft fur. So we'll create that brush. The amount of craft fur that I could go through is just unhealthy. So next step is grab some of this craft fur and go ahead and lay it out. Take those tweezers. I like how long these grips are so that you can really be able to get a good hold of it. Next we're going to tape our dubbing spinner. We're going to let that weight of this thing be able to pinch the material in here. This loop thing is really great though. Like I like a lot of this little contraption. Wow, we got craft fur everywhere. So next we're going to add a stinger hook to this fly. So take any hook that you like. I like a wide gap with a short shank. So we'll slap that in our vise and go ahead and dress it with your thread. Just go ahead and get that started. Next, I like to use fly line backing for this. So this is Dacron fly line backing. Head into your local fly shop. Usually if you ask for just a little bit of it, they'll probably just give it to you for free, but it's very cheap if you just buy it by the foot as well. So just pick up a little bit of fly line backing. We're going to add this tail. Should clean that up probably. Now, of course, because we don't have any hook in here, we're really not going to have very much weight at all. So we don't need a super strong connection to our tail. Next, we're going to use some flashy polar flash. So this is going to be, it's kind of going to operate like a hackle. It's got flash on either side of it that you're going to wrap, similar to a hackle. So any sort of polar flash, any sort of flashy wrap will do for you. We're going to use kind of a mirror color, pearl color here, to imitate a real flashy bait fish like a shad or something. We're not going to wrap all the way forward. We want to leave a little bit of space there. We're going to add a Schlappen feather at the end of this, so we want to make sure we leave enough room for a couple hackle wraps. We go in with my bodkin at the end here and just kind of pick it out, make sure there's no trapped fibers, make sure they're all kind of pointed in the same direction. Then, because we're gonna taper this fly from the tail kind of up towards the head, like you'd see a baitfish tapered, we're going to take our scissors in and trim this down. So the easiest way to do this is kind of hold the tail how it would be in the water and come in and trim kind of along a similar line. You definitely need a nice pair of scissors to be able to do this. So I kind of keep one of these pairs really sharp to be able to just trim these fibers out of here. So once you got that trimmed down, we're gonna grab some Schlappen. And we need kind of a smaller feather. We're gonna try to work off of just the taper for here. So we don't want it to be much further than where we trimmed our fibers. So before you even pick one off the whole hank here, you can kind of come in and lay out those feathers to kind of gauge about how long they're gonna be. So that one looks pretty good there. We're gonna preen it backwards. So when you lay these fibers down, you don't want it to be a lot longer than your flash that you put in. Next step is we're going to add a 25 millimeter shank. Of course, if you want to tie yours a little smaller or larger, you can adjust the shank sizes as well. Found these are pretty easy to take your bodkin to start it and then slide it down onto the hook eye. I like to have a little clip on my vise that I can clip in the tail with on a lot of large streamers and stuff that's articulated. Just kind of helps hold it on the vise while I'm tying. Going back over to the polar chenille, and we're going to go ahead and tie in another round of this. I really do like this stuff because it's pretty much waterproof. With the amount of flash here, it doesn't hold water. So even though this is a really big fly, it still is able to cast pretty well. And again, we're going to leave some room for that Schlappen wrap at the front. So make sure we're not crowding the hook eye. We're gonna go ahead and taper this one the same way. So we're gonna start working on cutting it back just so that it kind of tapers up from the tail forwards, just like a bait fish would look. Next, we need to pick another Schlappen feather. We've got these fibers being a little longer on this one, so we need a slightly larger Schlappen feather than the one we used at the first round, so that we get that, continue that tapered look. And it looks like I've used all the good ones out of here. So we can see that tapered body is really starting to come along. We got that smaller tail down here, a little bit bigger. And last, we're gonna end it on a bigger hook. It's still like a short shank, but with a wide gap. Go ahead and dress this one with your thread. Next, we're going to go back to that white backing that we used earlier. But this time, remember, since we do have that rear hook, if a fish grabs that rear hook, it's going to put pressure on this piece of backing. So we need to make sure that we tie it in really well. So I like to leave some extra hanging out over the front. Come rearwards with it and go ahead and thread the tail of your fly on. Trim it, and then I like to fold it over and double back on the backing. So if I'm going to have this backing that's going to be under pressure from potentially having a big fish eat this rear hook, I like to double it over to make sure it's going to be really solid. Well, at least cut that. There we go. Next up is I like to add a little bit of weight to the front of this. So we're going to add some wire wrap to it. This is pretty thick wire wrap. It's 0.35. Next, we're going to add in just a little bit of a flash again. And only come about halfway down because remember we're going to make our head here at the end. We need to pause real quick and put some more. So we're not going to trim this wrap, we're going to leave it, but part of the reason it's there is to really help make this head stand up. So last, we're going to end it with a streamer brush. So any sort of big, kind of puffy white streamer brush that you like will be just fine. But we're going to tie that in here. And that's going to be our head to finish the fly with. I really like these streamer brushes, again, because they don't hold water. This one's, especially this one's gonna push a lot of water and really help us taper the fly well so that the head's gonna be big and then taper all the way down towards the tail. And that's the end of it. We're gonna whip finish. And next, let's go ahead and take our bodkin again, and we're gonna brush this head back out just to make sure we don't have any fibers that are wrapped or trapped in there. And then last thing we're gonna go is we're gonna come in and kind of trim this in a little bit of a cone shape at the front of it to get a taper coming back this way. So that overall the fly is gonna taper up and then down. Back swims really well, nice and free, and you get that really nice tapered effect just like a real minnow would have, where you kind of have its nose tapering up and then back down its body. So you get that really good diamond shape while it's in the water, and it's one of my favorites.